The bright lights of the television studio cast sharp shadows across the floor as the cameras zoomed in. The stage was set for what was promised to be a political showdown like no other. On one side, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, the seasoned conservative known for his fiery speeches and unwavering stance on key issues. On the other, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York, a rising star in the Democratic Party whose progressive ideas had garnered national attention. Tonight, they were going head-to-head on national television. The host, a veteran political commentator, was practically giddy with excitement. He had been promoting the debate for weeks, hyping up the clash of ideologies. Ladies and gentlemen, the host announced, welcome to the great American political debate. Tonight, we have two of the most prominent figures in American politics, each representing diametrically opposed visions for our country. Senator Ted Cruz versus Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The audience erupted into applause as both politicians took their seats across from each other. Cruz, dressed in his trademark suit, adjusted his tie and flashed a confident smile while Ocasio-Cortez sat upright, exuding her characteristic energy and determination. The two exchanged polite but tense greetings before the debate kicked off. The host set the stage, introducing the first topic, climate change, its impact on the economy, national security, and the future of America. Senator Cruz, you have the floor. Cruz leaned forward, his voice steady and controlled as he began his argument. Let's be clear. The climate change narrative being pushed by radicals like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her allies is based on fear and misinformation. They want to implement draconian policies like the Green New Deal that will bankrupt hardworking Americans and destroy jobs. We should be focusing on practical solutions that protect our environment without sacrificing the livelihoods of our citizens. He paused, allowing the words to hang in the air, knowing the weight they carried. The conservative audience in the studio was already nodding along in agreement. Cruz had always been skilled at framing complex issues in terms that resonated with the everyday American voter. He continued, the science is not as settled as they claim. The climate has always been changing, and what we need is innovation, not government overreach. America should lead the world in energy production, not abandon our resources in favor of unrealistic and harmful policies. The camera panned to Ocasio-Cortez, whose expression remained calm and composed. When her turn came, she responded with a measured but passionate tone. Senator Cruz, she began, her voice cutting through the tension in the room, it's not about fear, it's about responsibility. The science is clear. Climate change is not a theory, it's a reality. And if we continue down this path of inaction, we will be leaving our children and grandchildren with a planet that is no longer capable of sustaining life as we know it. Ocasio-Cortez's eyes gleamed with intensity. The Green New Deal is not about bankrupting Americans, Senator. It's about creating millions of jobs in clean energy, building sustainable infrastructure, and ensuring a future for all Americans. You can talk about the status quo, but the reality is that our planet is dying, and it's time to act. We need bold solutions, and that's exactly what the Green New Deal offers. The crowd responded with mixed reactions, some applauding Ocasio-Cortez's bold stance, while others grumbled at the mention of the Green New Deal. Cruz didn't waste a second before firing back. Alexandria, I've heard this rhetoric time and time again. You talk about saving the planet, but your policies are out of touch with reality. They will kill jobs, raise taxes, and stifle economic growth. You want to replace reliable energy with fantasy projects, but that's not how the real world works. We can't afford to gamble with the livelihoods of millions of people. The tension in the room was palpable as the debate escalated. It was clear that neither Cruz nor Ocasio-Cortez was going to back down without a fight. The host interjected, attempting to keep the conversation moving. We're going to take a quick break, but when we return, we'll dive deeper into the economic implications of these policies. Stay tuned. As the cameras cut to commercial, the audience buzzed with excitement. The clash between the two political titans had only just begun, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. As the break ended, the lights brightened once again, signaling the return of the live broadcast. The camera zoomed in on both Cruz and Ocasio-Cortez, who were sitting on edge, their faces steely with determination. The host cleared his throat and introduced the next segment, shifting the conversation to the economic implications of climate policies. Let's talk about the economy, the host said. Senator Cruz, you argue that policies like the Green New Deal will be a financial burden. But Representative Ocasio-Cortez, you contend that these policies are an investment in America's future. How do you respond to critics who claim these measures will lead to economic collapse? Cruz immediately leaned forward, his tone firm and decisive. The Green New Deal is a socialist fantasy that will cost trillions of dollars. The American taxpayer will be the one footing the bill. You're asking people who are struggling to make ends meet to fund a radical agenda that will only benefit a select few. You talk about investments, but the reality is that these programs will saddle our children and grandchildren with debt for generations. He paused, letting his words sink in. This isn't just about energy, it's about the entire economy. Imagine a world where the government controls every aspect of our energy production, where businesses are forced to shut down because they can't afford the regulatory burden. That's not prosperity, that's economic destruction. Cruz's words hit like a hammer, each syllable calculated to make the audience reflect on the cost of such expansive policies. His conservative base in the audience cheered in approval, while a few supporters of Ocasio-Cortez's progressive agenda looked visibly uneasy. But Ocasio-Cortez was not about to let Cruz dominate the conversation. She sat up straight, her eyes locked on the senator as she rebutted his claims. Senator Cruz, you're missing the point. We're not talking about a handout, we're talking about making America a leader in the global economy. We're talking about industries that will generate millions of new jobs, not only in clean energy but in infrastructure, research, and development. We can create a modern economy that works for everyone, not just the wealthy elite. She gestured toward the cameras. The fossil fuel industry has benefited from billions in subsidies for decades. Why is it so unacceptable to reinvest that money in a green economy? Why is it so wrong to prioritize the health and future of our children over the short-term profits of big corporations? If we don't act now, we won't have a world left to save and no economy to speak of. Ocasio-Cortez's words were impassioned, and the studio audience erupted in applause. Cruz's supporters jeered, but there was no denying the force behind her argument. The host, sensing the growing tension, quickly intervened. Senator Cruz, Representative Ocasio-Cortez, let's take a step back. Senator Cruz, how do you respond to the argument that inaction on climate change will only lead to more economic harm in the long run? Cruz didn't flinch. The best way to ensure economic prosperity is to let the free market work. Innovation and technological advancements happen when we get the government out of the way. If the Green New Deal becomes a reality, it will create a bloated bureaucracy and stifle entrepreneurship. America is a land of opportunity. What we need is a focus on empowering businesses, not strangling them with regulation. He turned to Ocasio-Cortez. You can talk about green jobs all day, but the truth is, those jobs won't be enough to replace the millions of jobs we'll lose in the energy and manufacturing sectors. You're dreaming if you think we can transition overnight without catastrophic consequences. The debate had reached a boiling point. Ocasio-Cortez was clearly frustrated, but she didn't back down. Senator Cruz, your entire argument is based on fear. Fear of change. Fear of progress. We can transition, and we can do it in a way that leaves no one behind. The real catastrophe is inaction. The real tragedy is letting our future slip away because we're too scared to make bold choices. For a moment, there was silence in the studio. The audience could feel the weight of the words in the air. The host, who had been trying to keep the debate civil, now saw an opportunity to drive the conversation home. Representative Ocasio-Cortez, what do you say to critics who claim that your vision for the future is unrealistic and idealistic? Ocasio-Cortez's response was swift and confident. I say that sometimes the greatest changes in history were once considered impossible. It's easy to say something can't be done when you're clinging to the old ways of thinking. But America was built on the belief that we could overcome any challenge, whether it was civil rights, space exploration, or the New Deal. We are at a crossroads. We can choose to embrace the future, or we can watch it slip away. Her words resonated deeply with many in the audience, but Cruz wasn't about to give in. You're right about one thing, Alexandria. America is built on overcoming challenges. But we do it by staying grounded in reality, not by making impossible promises that we can't deliver. Your plan will not only fail, it will destroy the very economy that makes America great. The debate was heating up, and it was clear that neither side was going to budge. Cruz and Ocasio-Cortez were locked in an ideological battle that seemed to have no clear winner. The host, clearly captivated by the intensity of the conversation, set the stage for the next round. We're going to take a quick break, but when we return, We'll tackle the issue of healthcare and the role government should play in the economy. Stay with us. The camera panned out as the tension in the room reached a boiling point. The showdown was far from over. The tension in the studio was palpable as the lights dimmed momentarily for the break. The debate was starting to take on a rhythm of its own, with both Cruz and Ocasio-Cortez passionately defending their ideologies. When the cameras returned, the host wasted no time in diving into the next big issue, healthcare. It was a topic that had been hotly contested for years, and with the country deeply divided over the future of the American healthcare system, it promised to keep the audience on the edge of their seats. Welcome back, folks. Tonight, we're watching a fierce debate between two powerful voices in American politics. Now, we shift gears to one of the most divisive issues of our time, healthcare. Senator Cruz, your party has been outspoken about repealing the Affordable Care Act, but Representative Ocasio-Cortez, you're advocating for Medicare for all. Let's start with you, Senator Cruz. Why do you oppose Medicare for all, and what do you propose instead? Cruz was quick to respond, his voice commanding and confident. The idea of Medicare for all is a government takeover of the healthcare system. It's a one-size-fits-all approach that will strip Americans of their choices and force them into a bloated, inefficient system. Under Medicare for all, the government controls everything from who your doctor is to the treatment options available to you. We've seen what happens when the government takes over industries like healthcare. Wait times increase, quality decreases, and costs skyrocket. The Affordable Care Act, as disastrous as it was, still left people with limited choices and higher premiums. Medicare for all would make things even worse. He paused, looking directly at Ocasio-Cortez. What we need is a healthcare system that empowers individuals. We need more competition, not less. We need to lower premiums, reduce regulations, and allow private insurers to compete across state lines. That's how we create an affordable, sustainable system, by getting the government out of the way. The camera shifted to Ocasio-Cortez, who was visibly ready for her turn. She leaned forward, her voice passionate and direct. Senator Cruz, your vision for healthcare is exactly what's wrong with our system. The truth is, millions of Americans are going bankrupt every year because they can't afford basic healthcare. They're forced to choose between life-saving treatments and putting food on the table. And why? Because healthcare is treated as a profit-making business. Private insurers care more about their bottom lines than the well-being of the people they're supposed to serve. Ocasio-Cortez's eyes sparkled with intensity as she continued. Medicare for all isn't just a policy, it's a moral imperative. Healthcare is a right, not a privilege. It's time we put people before profits. Under Medicare for all, everyone in America would have access to affordable, high-quality care. No one would be left behind, and no one would have to choose between their health and their finances. The studio audience reacted to Ocasio-Cortez's passionate response, some clapping and cheering, while others remained silent, reflecting on the weight of her words. Cruz, ever the seasoned debater, seized the opportunity to counter her argument. Alexandria, you're ignoring the realities of our healthcare system. Government-run programs like Medicare for all are unsustainable. We're talking about trillions of dollars in new spending, and that doesn't even take into account the fact that it would dramatically increase taxes for every American. You say healthcare is a right, but that doesn't mean we can afford to bankrupt the country trying to make it free for everyone. The real solution is to fix the system we have, not throw it out entirely. Cruz's supporters cheered, but Ocasio-Cortez was ready with her rebuttal. Senator, you're avoiding the bigger issue, the fact that private insurance companies are profiting off the suffering of the American people. You want to preserve a broken system that leaves too many Americans without the care they need. Medicare for all isn't about free healthcare. It's about guaranteeing healthcare for all. If we can afford to bail out banks and subsidize big corporations, we can afford to take care of our citizens. The back and forth continued for several minutes, each side entrenched in their positions. Cruz argued that government-run healthcare would lead to long wait times, inefficiencies, and a reduction in quality, while Ocasio-Cortez emphasized the moral responsibility to provide healthcare to every American, regardless of income. The two were locked in a battle of ideals, and it seemed there was no middle ground. The host, sensing the need to keep the conversation moving, addressed the next aspect of the healthcare debate: the financial implications. Senator Cruz, you've talked about the costs of Medicare for all. Representative Ocasio-Cortez, How do you respond to the concern that Medicare for all will cost taxpayers trillions of dollars? Ocasio-Cortez didn't hesitate. The cost of inaction is far greater. Right now, millions of Americans are struggling to pay for healthcare, and insurance premiums are through the roof. We're already spending a fortune on healthcare, but the money is going to insurance companies, not to the people who need care. Medicare for all would actually reduce overall healthcare costs by cutting out the profit-driven middlemen. And yes, it would require a tax increase, but it's a small price to pay for ensuring that every American has access to the care they deserve. Cruz, his voice tinged with skepticism, shot back. Alexandria, that's just not true. Medicare for all would devastate the economy. You can't simply wave a magic wand and pretend that a tax hike won't hurt small businesses, workers, and families. Your plan doesn't address the root problem of skyrocketing healthcare costs. It just makes the government responsible for everything, which is exactly what we don't need. The debate had reached a boiling point. The audience could feel the heat between the two as they clashed on one of the most critical issues facing America. Cruz's supporters were firm in their belief that private enterprise was the solution, while Ocasio-Cortez followers passionately argued for a more equitable system where healthcare was a fundamental right. As the segment came to an end, the host reminded both politicians that they were running out of time. We've got just a few more minutes left before we wrap up tonight's debate. In the next segment, we'll discuss the role of government in American life, whether we need more or less intervention. Cruz and Ocasio-Cortez nodded, but their eyes remained locked on each other. The political battle was far from over. The lights dimmed again as the debate shifted to the final segment, the most anticipated one of the evening. The host, eager to wrap up the high-stakes discussion, steered the conversation toward the broader issue of government intervention in the economy and society. This was the moment both Cruz and Ocasio-Cortez had been waiting for. It was the ultimate clash of philosophies. All right, we've tackled healthcare, but now let's talk about the role of government in our lives, the host announced. Senator Cruz, you've often argued that the government should step back and let the private sector lead. Representative Ocasio-Cortez, you've advocated for increased government intervention to address issues like inequality, climate change, and education. So, let's dive in. Where do you stand on the role of government? Should it do more or less? Cruz leaned back in his chair, exuding confidence. The role of government should be limited. The Founding Fathers designed our Constitution to protect individual freedom, not to create an overbearing, bloated government that tells people how to live their lives. America thrives when the government gets out of the way, when we empower people to make their own decisions. Government interference stifles innovation and personal responsibility. Whether it's in business, education, or healthcare, we need less government, more freedom. He looked directly at Ocasio-Cortez. The problem with your approach is that you want to put government in charge of everything. You want the government to control energy, healthcare, education, the entire economy. That kind of control leads to tyranny. It's a slippery slope. Once you give the government that kind of power, it's hard to ever take it back. We've seen this happen in countries that have adopted socialism. It never ends well. Ocasio-Cortez took a deep breath, her posture straightening as she prepared to respond. Senator Cruz, your belief in limited government sounds good in theory, but it doesn't work in practice for millions of Americans. The truth is, many people are being left behind by an economy that favors the rich and powerful. When the government doesn't intervene, when there's no regulation, corporate interests run rampant, and ordinary people suffer. Her voice became more intense as she continued. Government intervention is necessary to level the playing field. We need policies that ensure everyone has access to quality education, healthcare, and economic opportunity. Without government action, we're allowing the powerful to maintain their hold over the system, leaving the rest of us to fight for scraps. Cruz scoffed. You're painting a very bleak picture of America. Yes, there are challenges, but those challenges aren't solved by making the government bigger. We've seen what happens when the government grows. It leads to inefficiency, waste, and a loss of freedom. Look at the disaster that was the Soviet Union or the failed policies in Venezuela. More government isn't the answer. Ocasio-Cortez was unfazed. And I'm sure you've seen the success of countries like Sweden, Norway, and Denmark. These nations have a robust social safety net, high standards of living, and a healthy, thriving economy. Their governments take an active role in ensuring that no one gets left behind and their people have access to universal healthcare, free education, and paid family leave. The debate was now reaching its climax and both sides were going for the jugular. Cruz wasn't backing down though, and his voice carried the weight of his convictions. What you fail to realize, Alexandria, is that America is unique. We were built on the principle of individual liberty. We're not like European countries with their socialist welfare systems. We can't just replicate their model because it doesn't work for us. In America, we have the freedom to succeed or fail on our own terms. That's what makes us exceptional. Ocasio-Cortez's face reddened with passion. You talk about individual liberty, but what about the liberty to live a life free from poverty, disease, and fear of the future? What about the liberty to have a job that pays a livable wage and provides healthcare for your family? What good is freedom if you're trapped in a system that's rigged against you? The audience, now fully engaged, hung on every word. Cruz and Ocasio-Cortez had both become symbols of their respective ideologies, and the battle between limited government and government intervention was playing out on live TV for all to see. The host, clearly aware of the weight of the debate, quickly stepped in to guide the conversation. Senator Cruz, Representative Ocasio-Cortez, we've heard compelling arguments from both sides. But I want to ask you both, what is your vision for the future of America? What do you want the country to look like 10 years from now? Cruz's answer came quickly. I want America to be a place where individual freedom and personal responsibility are paramount. Where the government gets out of the way and allows people to make their own decisions. A country where entrepreneurship, hard work, and innovation are the drivers of our success. I want to see a thriving economy with low taxes, limited regulation, and a government that is accountable to the people. Ocasio-Cortez smiled, her tone unwavering. I want America to be a place where everyone, regardless of their background, has the opportunity to thrive. Where the government takes an active role in addressing climate change, income inequality, and healthcare. A country where we don't leave anyone behind and where future generations can live in a world that is healthier, more sustainable, and more just. The host looked at the clock. The debate was nearing its end and the tension was so thick that it seemed like you could cut it with a knife. Senator Cruz, Representative Ocasio-Cortez, we're out of time for tonight. But thank you both for your passionate and spirited debate. This discussion is far from over, but it's clear that the future of America is in the hands of the people who will vote in the next election. As the camera pulled back, Cruz and Ocasio-Cortez exchanged a brief nod, respect, but no surrender. The stage was set for the next round, but for tonight, the battle between conservative and progressive ideologies had been fought with unmatched fervor. The lights dimmed one last time as the final minutes of the debate loomed ahead. The tension in the room was electric, a palpable weight that seemed to hang in the air like an unresolved question. Both Ted Cruz and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had made their cases, each passionately defending their ideological vision for America. Now it was time for the closing remarks. This was the moment when they could deliver their final blows, leaving a lasting impression on the audience. The host looked at both politicians, his expression a mix of anticipation and respect. We've heard some fiery exchanges tonight. It's clear that you both feel strongly about the direction this country should take. Now, I want to give each of you a chance to make your closing statement. Senator Cruz, you're up first. What is your message to the American people? Cruz took a deep breath, sitting up straighter in his chair. His eyes were focused, his voice firm and unwavering. He had spent years refining his arguments, and this moment was no different. He knew this closing statement could make or break his message. Thank you, and thank you to Representative Ocasio-Cortez for the spirited debate tonight, Cruz began, his tone calm but with a subtle edge of authority. Tonight, we've seen the stark contrast between our visions for America. I stand before you as someone who believes in the greatness of this country, the greatness that comes from our people, our work ethic, and our freedom. America was built on the idea that individuals, not the government, are the true drivers of success. When we give people the freedom to make their own choices, they will rise to the occasion and build a prosperous future. Cruz's voice gained momentum as he continued. I believe in an America where the government is small, accountable, and focused on defending our rights, not on controlling our lives. We've seen how big government can fail, time and time again, whether it's in the failed policies of socialism or the disastrous outcomes of government-run programs. We need to get the government out of the way so that our economy can thrive, so that our people can prosper. He paused for a moment, allowing his words to settle. If you believe in freedom, if you believe in the power of the individual, then I urge you to stand with us. The future of America depends on the choices we make today. Together, we can restore this country to greatness. With that, Cruz nodded respectfully toward Ocasio-Cortez, signaling the end of his closing remarks. The audience erupted into applause, some cheering, others clapping with approval of his passionate defense of individual freedom and limited government. Ocasio-Cortez, unfazed, was ready with her own closing statement. She rose slightly in her seat, her eyes scanning the room as she prepared to deliver the final word. Her voice was steady, but there was an undeniable fire behind it. "Thank you, Senator Cruz. It's been an honor to have this debate," she began, her tone both respectful and resolute. "But let's be clear, tonight, we've seen the stark difference in our visions for America. Senator Cruz and I may differ on the role of government, but the truth is, this country was built on the idea that we take care of one another. We are stronger when we work together, when we ensure that everyone has access to the basic necessities of life, healthcare, education, housing. These aren't just privileges, they're rights." She leaned forward, her passion growing. "For too long, we've allowed corporations and the wealthy to dictate the policies that shape our lives. For too long, we've allowed the richest among us to profit while the rest of us struggle. We can do better. We must do better. We are a nation of immigrants, of dreamers, of hardworking people who deserve to have their voices heard. We deserve a future where no one is left behind." Her voice softened, but the conviction remained. "I believe in an America where the government works for the people. A government that ensures no one goes without healthcare, a government that addresses the climate crisis, a government that makes sure every child has the education they need to succeed. An America that is just, fair, and inclusive. This is the future I want for our children and for all of us." The room was silent for a moment before a wave of applause surged through the studio. Some in the audience stood, clapping and cheering loudly for Ocasio-Cortez's impassioned defense of progressive policies. Cruz's supporters, of course, remained seated, but there was no denying the energy in the air. The host, now sensing the conclusion of the debate, addressed the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've just witnessed a truly intense and thought-provoking debate. Senator Cruz and Representative Ocasio-Cortez have both made compelling arguments, and we are fortunate to have had them here tonight. The choice, as always, is in the hands of the American people." He turned back to the two debaters. "Senator Cruz, Representative Ocasio-Cortez, thank you both for joining us tonight and sharing your visions for the future of America. This debate may be over, but the discussion is far from finished. The stakes are high and the future is uncertain, but it is up to us as citizens to decide the path we will take." The camera zoomed out, capturing the final moments of the debate. Cruz and Ocasio-Cortez exchanged another brief yet respectful glance. Their clash of ideas had come to a close, but the ideological divide remained. The stage was set for the next round of political battles, the 2024 election just around the corner. The studio lights dimmed one last time as the debate concluded, but the intensity of the discussion lingered. Across America, people were already discussing the fiery exchange they had just witnessed. In living rooms, offices, and coffee shops, the debate would continue long after the cameras stopped rolling. The battle for America's future was far from over. In the end, it was a clash not just of two individuals, but of two competing visions for the soul of the nation.